Good afternoon, everyone out there on the interwebs. My name is Jared, and this is my channel, Mazda B3K. This is going to be a 5-minute fix video about replacing a worn-out idler pulley in my 2001 Ford F-250 named Miss Mildew. Without further ado, let's get started. So I noticed that when I crank my truck, that sometimes it cranks fine, just like this, but what'll happen from time to time is you'll start hearing a screeching, yowling noise, and there it is, right there. And it actually is pretty loud if you're up on it. Yeah, kind of doing that right there. So I went ahead, and in order to identify this, we've got a bad pulley. So we're going to need to turn it off, take the belt off, and then check the pulleys. Okay, so to take the belt off, there's going to be a square inside of the idler, right there. Well, the tensioner. Right here, and it will accept a 1/2 socket. So what I do is I've got this lovely 3-foot breaker bar, and so you get the breaker bar in there, and then you're going to turn it to the right clockwise, and that's going to loosen tension on the belt, and then you can just slip it right off the alternator, and that'll let us start to freely spin the various pulleys and see if we can figure out which one's making the noise. So I've got my breaker bar in, as you can see, and I'm gonna need both hands, but you turn this, you push this to the right, and that loosens. See how the belt loosened up and tightened up? That loosens the belt so you can slip it off. So that's what we're doing next. Okay, so now we have the belt loose, so now we can start spinning each pulley. And what we're looking for is when we spin it, is there a ton of noise? Like that one's squeaking a little bit, the alternator, so it's probably okay, but something I'll have to keep an eye on. And when I turn the water pump, I get the belt out of the way. I have to get it off. Power steering. Okay. Got it off power steering, so now we can turn it without getting caught on stuff. It's pretty quiet, so the water pump sounds okay. And when we look at the, get this out of the way, the idler, it doesn't want to spin well at all. So we probably want to look at that one a little bit further. And the AC compressor, it spins pretty well because I already checked it, and same thing with the power steering pump. So we're going to go ahead and take the idler off. To take it off, it is a 13mm bolt. Alright, once you loosen up the bolt, it should just come out by hand. Like so. And the pulley might be a little bit stuck if this is the original and you haven't replaced it or anything. So you have to kind of wiggle it, pull it off square. So it'll come off. And then what you can do to test is, this is a bearing right here. So you can stick your finger in the bearing and then try to spin it on your finger. And what you'll see when you spin this one is it really doesn't want to spin. I'm having to push pretty hard with my finger to make it turn. And if I was doing this with two hands, you could actually hear some of the bearings in it kind of go scree. So this pulley is done and needs to be replaced. Fortunately, I do have a replacement. So this is our replacement idler pulley made by Dayco. It is a Dayco 89048. You can also get one made by Dorman, which is what I wanted, but they didn't have it, so I wound up getting this one. It's twice as expensive. Grumble, grumble, grumble. The original manufacturer, I don't know if that's going to come up in the camera, is Littens. I'm not sure how I pronounce it. So this was the original pulley. Has 270,000 miles on it. Not bad. But you can see if you take this and I put it in one hand, I can very easily just spin it with my thumb. It was a battle with the old pulley. This one just spins like butter. So that pulley was bad. So now we just need to put it back on. And putting it back on is exactly the same as taking it off. Get it centered. It has a little post that it sits on right there. So get it centered on that post. Put your 13mm bolt back in. Snug it up. And then we'll get to the tricky part, which is putting the belt back on. Because you kind of need about 4 hands to do it. So it's kind of tricky to do just by yourself. Alright, so this is my recommendation to you. You know where the tensioner is, where you got to turn it to loosen the belt up. What I do is I get it routed down and around the power steering, and then I leave it close to the alternator, but I make the alternator where the last pulley that I hook it on. So that way you're not having to dig deep down in front of the engine to try to get this stuff back on. And make sure that when you do this, that for the parts of the belt that are ribbed, that they're sitting inside their grooves correctly. And also that the smooth parts of the belt are sitting mostly centered. We're a little bit off there on the water pump, but the hope is that that'll center itself because all of the ribbed stuff is sitting firmly in its grooves in the correct orientation and position. So with all of that done, we'll go ahead and crank it and we'll see if that fixed the issue. Alright, here we go. Let's see.
Walk right there where it's supposed to go.
Alright, so give you an update there without cutting myself. You can see the power steering, or sorry, the water pump, that walked back where it needed to go because everything else was good. All the rib stuff, like I said. So we're going to let this run for a few minutes and see if that yowling screech comes back. If it doesn't, then that verifies that our bad pulley, at least this time, was the idler. So the engine has idled now for about 5 minutes and we have not heard that noise come back. The only thing we hear is the injectors firing, so this is a good repair.